Hey everyone, this is Jamila with some information on how to rebrand yourself. This workshop was designed specifically for people who are re-entering the workforce after being out for a little while, or a lot of while. Maybe you've dealt with incarceration, or were let go from a job, or were home taking care of children or aging parents. Whatever the case, the information here applies to you. We'll discuss identifying your hard and soft skills, creating a functional resume, including volunteer and non-paid work experience on your resume, and finally, we'll discuss ways to answer application and interview questions. First, let's talk for a minute about hard skills. Hard skills are the abilities and knowledge needed to perform specific tasks. Skills in manufacturing, accounting, and technology help you explain your practical qualifications for the job. It might be helpful to think about any on-the-job training you've completed. Maybe a time when you've shadowed a coworker to learn specific tasks or software. Also, times when you have operated machinery or equipment. These would be considered your hard skills. Now, we can take some time to identify your soft skills. Soft skills are personal attributes that enable someone to interact effectively and harmoniously with other people. Communication, adaptability, teamwork, and critical thinking help you get and keep the job. With these skills in mind, you might want to think about the way you've dealt with customer issues, spoken publicly about an issue or complaint, helped resolve an issue or complaint, managed your time to complete major tasks or projects, or worked with a group of people to produce results for your organization. Getting clear on both the hard and soft skills you bring into a workplace increases your ability to discuss them in an interview setting. Always take a moment to write down what's true about you. Let's move forward now and talk about your resume. Most job seekers know there's more than one way to format your resume, depending on the job you're applying for and how qualified you are for that job. One resume format we'll discuss is the functional resume. Functional resumes are good if you have gaps in your work history, are re-entering the workforce, have frequently changed jobs, are looking to transition into a new career, or don't fit the mold of what recruiters are looking for in the positions that you want. What makes the functional resume different from the traditional resume is formatting, or the use of space on the resume. The functional resume begins with a career path and a summary description of how you are uniquely qualified for the job. It will be an additional sentence added to your career objective. It also emphasizes core qualifications. In this way, it could be a few bullet points longer than your summary of qualifications. Like mentioned before, it will list your work experience at the end. And, overall, it requires more description of your skills. Let's look at an example. This fictional job seeker, Todd Wakeman, has his name and contact information placed at the top, just like the traditional resume. What makes this resume so different? He then includes a focus, or a career path description. It works similarly to an objective statement, but includes a longer description of the work he is able to do. He labels this portion Focus, General Labor. You might consider including a career focus on your resume also. Essentially, name the position you are seeking. Remember, this can always change depending on where you apply. Then, he emphasizes his core qualifications. A great deal of what's listed here are his technical abilities for the job he is applying to. He uses more space here than might be used in a traditional resume to explain qualifications. Because he is a little less sure of how his chronological work history will seem to employers, he will emphasize what he can through his qualifications. If having a functional resume is good for you, consider doing the same. Down here, the resume lists work experience at the end. And even if chronological work history isn't the part you're most proud of, you still want to leave room for the employer to glance here. The hope is that you're proving your qualifications in other parts of the resume. A few other areas of your resume might also help get it noticed. Let's talk about ways to build your resume. Anytime you are editing your resume, you want to think through some work or work-like activity you might have forgotten about. First, what volunteer opportunities have you engaged in recently? Think about community service, nonprofit volunteerism, or church involvement. Don't discount any work experience you have, especially if this volunteer experience fills a gap in your work history. Here's what your resume might look like when you add volunteer or unpaid work experience. You'll describe where you did the work. You can give yourself a job title. Use active verbs to describe your work using onetonline.org. Then you'll make a note of how long you did the work. You will see that this person worked on a picnic coordinating committee, and while it only lasted a month, it gave her significant work experience to account for. These work tasks were taken from onetonline.org, which is a great tool to build a full list description of the work that you have done in the past. If you don't have volunteer experience, start volunteering as soon as possible. Select any of the local nonprofits to begin giving back for many reasons. First, it keeps you busy and active while you're in the job search process, likely improving the employer's perception of you while you're not employed. Second, it gives you work experience that you would not otherwise have. This might be worth listing as work history on your resume. Finally, it might also give you an opportunity to network. By volunteering, you give yourself access to a group or groups of people with whom you can share your job search when the time is right. Not only can you tell them about what you can do and the work you're seeking, but through volunteering, they will also have insight on how you work. As we know, it's not about what you know or who you know, it's about who knows what you know. In your formal work or in your own professional development, think about all you have participated in. Any self-initiated trainings should be listed somewhere on your resume. Any professional or trade organizations should also be noted. And finally, if you have any occupational training or certifications, be sure to include that as well. We'll discuss one final way of building your resume. And that's through homemaker experience. If you've been handling business at home and out of the workforce for a while, whether you are caring for children or an aging parent, you will want to think about adding some specific roles you held. Now, you won't exactly list things like daily chores, budgeting, and errands to your resume. Do your best to think a little deeper. Were you on any committees? Have you met consistently with any groups? Did you lead any clubs, groups, or organizations? Did you plan, organize, or supervise? If you've been a part of any organized effort, consider adding those things to your resume. You might not have been paid for it, but if you walked away with some specific skills in leading and managing, it could benefit you to document that. Anytime you are editing your resume, you will want to think through previous work or work-related activity you might have forgotten about. What opportunities have you taken part in recently? Now, let's discuss some hard-to-answer application questions. When it comes to criminal history, you will want to be honest. However, some people choose to simply indicate on their paper application, "We'll describe details in interview." When you use this statement, you do run the risk of the employer simply tossing your application. But if you have a hunch that that's what's happening anyways, you might choose to use this statement in hopes that your resume and cover letter explain your qualifications well enough to get your foot in the door. When it comes to termination or layoff of a previous job, just ensure that what you have here is positively worded. When you do secure the interview, here are some helpful guidelines when criminal background, layoff, or termination comes up. When asked in the interview, you can describe your background or previous work situation, but be sure to only state facts and avoid long stories. Be clear about what the employer is asking. That way, you are sure to answer that exact question. If the question requires explanation, still be clear and concise in the story that you tell. Next, always give behavioral examples of your personal change. This means you tell the employer about the positive way you responded to a situation when maybe something didn't go the way you were expecting it to. This will be a story, but still succinct. Emphasize the difference between your old ways and your new ways. Then, describe what you would do and changes you would make when given a second chance. This means that if the employer invites you into their business, tell them how they might benefit from your work ethic. Finally, be sure to emphasize your strengths and what you can contribute to the company. Think about the way you work and how this contribution can ultimately benefit the business you will go on to work for. As we wrap up today's workshop, we've discussed identifying your hard and soft skills, creating a functional resume, including volunteer and non-paid work experience to your resume, and answering application and interview questions. With these tips, I hope you are thinking actively about ways you can improve your job search and additions you might make to your resume, cover letter, and applications to really give yourself a boost in the hiring process. That's all for today. Thanks so much for joining, and I'm wishing you all the best in your job search.